So this is the fifth in this series of talks. Curious because all of a sudden, in the process of preparing this talk, it dawned on me that it's the fifth in a series of 9. So it's right in the center. And this is right in the center, the topic that I'm going to try and talk about today is right at the center of our experiences in this mysterious path, which we can call generally the mystical path. And as I was preparing, and in fact it was a long process that, not a long process in the sense of bringing the material together or even of writing the material, but something in me had to melt in order to write this talk. And so it was an extremely powerful process. Because, among other things, I was aware that writing about Eros and the mystical quest is writing about a very powerful energy, about a very powerful Greek, if you were Greek, we would say a very powerful God. But since we are not Greek, we just say a very powerful energy. And it's not at all like writing about the longing. In this talk, there is very little about the longing, simply because I have talked about the longing in the first the first talk of this series, which I called Waiting at the Threshold of Love. This is actually trying to hold the bull by the horns. And it was not at all easy, so I must admit that it's been some kind of experience. I also would like to say before I start, because I think I need my notes, I also wanted to say that I've used in this talk quite a few quotations from the work of Ibn Arabi. Now, Ibn Arabi was a Sufi teacher from Andalus in the 13th century, more or less a contemporary of Rumi, and he's usually taken to be a counterpart of Rumi. Rumi is taken to be this flowing love poet, and Ibn Arabi is taken to be this philosopher of love. But I've found, and of course I'm not the only one, that Ibn Arabi, through his experiences, through his concrete, real, living experiences, was able to write in such a clear and lucid way. He managed to write about love, about Eros in the mystical quest, in such a lucid way that although it sounds philosophical, it's in fact very lucid and very clear. But it does need a little bit of perseverance in order to go into the texts. So as I say, this is not going to be easy. Preparing this talk, I feel that I have to overcome a part in me which is very reluctant to make a talk out of Eros and the mystical quest. There is something too intimate, too precious, too shy in the experience of love, which does not wish to come out into the open. The sensitive words of Jenny Cousin echo in my ears. Put away your hands. A bud cannot be opened by a man. As I'm writing this, I'm surrounded by many books, old ones, new ones. And these books contain many love poems, or many passages about love. All these delicious fruits of love written by men and women of all ages and generations. Now love wants to hide. It wants to withdraw into its sacred shrine in the innermost part of the soul. But love desires also to be exposed, to be revealed, to show its beauty to the whole world, to pour itself out into the open without inhibitions, to be totally naked, to run free. And this is why so many men and women have expressed the most concealed desires, the most agonizing longing in the language of love poetry. Baysab says, love cannot be hidden, and Mrs. Tweedy records his words. What is in the heart becomes expressed outwardly. The exterior reflects the inner attitude. It cannot be helped. It is like love. It cannot be hidden. So if we think a minute, the essence of love is a shared experience. It's something that wants to be shared by its very nature. And yet it's so intimate that it always wants to retreat. So from the outset, there's a pull, there's a tension, and this tension is there all along. It is difficult to talk of love because love is a state of melting. It is an experience in which opposites merge with one another without boundaries, just melting into one another, without differentiation, like the colors in a potter's furnace, just everything mingling together. Words, on the other end, are distinct, clear-cut, differentiating, isolating. So between the wish to remain totally dumbfounded and silent, and the wish, or rather the need, to make verbal love to love, the heart oscillates no end. And thus between one silence and the other, we hesitantly try to communicate. This is the way of love. It wants to say, I love you. I am overcome by you. I melt in your presence. I melt when I hear your name. I melt when I remember your nearness at those times when you are far away from me. It also wants to say things in praise of the loved one. As in the poetry of the Song of Songs, behold, thou art fair, my love. Behold, thou art fair. Thine eyes are like doves. It's not just a romantic saying. Love wants to say these things. And it wants also to hear the same words of adoration echo back. Behold, thou art fair, my beloved. Yeah, pleasant. The lover wants to say to his beloved woman, as the lily among thorns, so is my love among the daughters. And he wants to hear his beloved woman say to him, as the apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. You can hear the dialogue, you can hear the songs moving from one to the other. So love wants to be expressed in a dialogue. It is in its very essence an experience between two entities, the lover and the beloved. These two, who at any moment may change roles, may change positions, may change moods, as in every human love affair. It is so human. We are talking about ourselves. But who is the lover? Who is the beloved? Between whom is the dialogue of love taking place? These powerful words by Baysab, which were recorded by Mrs. Tweedy in her diaries, may give us a clue. Baysab says, in the whole of the universe, there are only two, the lover and the beloved. God loves his creation, and the soul loves God. In order to be able to create, the one being had to become two. And logically, there had to be a difference between the two. This is the essence of the polarity. This is the essence of the pull and attraction between the opposites. The creation was only possible because of the two opposites. Everything in creation responds either to the positive or to the negative force or vibrations. There is the sound and the echo. There is the call and the response to it. There is light and there is darkness. Without the opposing forces, how could the world exist? Now, if we remove ourselves from the logic of the words, from the theory, from the concept behind the words, and try to visualize, this is something inclusive. This is something that includes everything. So these words are so powerful because they convey something which both transcends and includes the whole range of our human experience. What Baysab, what Guruji is saying here, that there is nothing else except these two. These words do not talk like the Platonists and their followers about Eros as the desire to unite which exists between the two separated halves of the primordial hermaphrodite. It doesn't talk about that. According to Baysab's statement, the two separate entities which agonizingly desire one another are God and creation, not one half of a human being and its other half. So this is the ultimate, the most sublime, but at the same time the most basic, the most fundamental tension of the opposites, and the desire to cleave to one another in order to become whole. I'm saying that it's the loftiest, but at the same time the most fundamental, because it includes everything. It includes the instincts and it includes the loftiest aspiration. All other sets or pairs of opposites are merely the reflection, merely the shadow of this primary pair, God and creation. This statement is also so powerful because what it conveys is that love between God and man is not to be taken on a metaphorical level. It's not in a manner of speech. This is no mere metaphor, and it is no sheer poetic way of conveying something celestial, ineffable by an allegory, a paraphrase, or an allusion. Not at all. Here, in these sentences, Baysab talks about the very burning reality, the living reality of the love which exists between God and creation. In the whole of the universe, there are only two, the lover and the beloved. And I'd like to emphasize this, there are, something that exists. It's not a figment of the imagination. It's not the way that poets or artists talk. It's the way things are. If we could really plunge in the whole of our being into the very depth of this mystery, our lives would surely not be the same anymore. We're just dipping the edge. We're just skimming the surface. If we could really plunge into it, we won't be the same anymore. It's a little bit like Mrs. Tweedy saying, or quoting, if you want truth, as a drowning man wants air, you'll get reality in a split second. Now, similarly powerful words we read in Ibn Arabi. Now, we need a lot of attention for that. He says, the breath of the All-Merciful, may the cosmos manifest in order to release the property of love, and in order to relieve what the lover found in himself. The All-Merciful is, of course, God. So he, God, the All-Merciful, knew himself through witnessing in the manifest, in us. God is qualified by love for us, and love is a property that demands that he who is described by it be merciful toward himself. I think that's very wonderful. Love is a property that demands that he who is described by it be merciful toward himself. Love and mercy go together. They are actually synonyms. So nothing emerges from him except the mercy which embraces all things. This is from the Quran. His mercy embraces all things. It extends to the whole cosmos, that which is and that which has not yet come to be. Now, in this statement, there is an extremely subtle combination or bringing together of the quality of love, the quality of compassion, and the creative energy. And the creative energy as we know it also from our human experience. So what does it mean to release the property of love and to relieve what the lover found in himself? This, according to Ibn Arabi, is why or how God created the universe. Now, we can only understand this if we look into our own experiences of love. When we carry a great deal of love in our hearts, we aspire to share it. We need to share it. We need to give it some kind of expression. We need to project it into something, or better still, into someone who is other than us. By doing so, we are relieved from keeping our love all to ourselves. It's as if I'm going pregnant with my love, holding it, and it wants to be given. So by doing so, we are relieved from keeping our love all to ourselves, all within ourselves, coiled and hidden. And if we take it one step further, we can see how it works also in the erotic, sexual level. There is a great urge in us to find release to our libidos. That's what the release means. The erotic drive desires, by its very nature, to find an outlet in another. And it is through the activation of this desire that lovers become procreators. And that's the mystery of the reflection of man and the divine. Because this is how God, according to this, created the world, through this tremendous urge, through this tremendous impulse to pour out its energy, to pour out its creative energy. And when we, on our little human scale, experience this and activate it, then we also become procreators. As above, so below. The relationship between God and creation springs from the same erotic principle. The externalized act of love is seen in this bold system of Ibn Arabi as an exhalation, as a breathing out of God's self-love into an other, into creation. So creation comes about in an explosive act which is subtly described in orgasmic terms. God's love, which was folded into itself, which was totally immersed within itself, totally pointing toward itself, poured out in a tremendous, potent release of creative energy. Giving relief, writes Ibn Arabi, he is commenting on his own statements. So giving relief, he writes, is to eliminate constriction. When the possible thing knows its possibility while in the state of non-existence, it is distressed, since it yearns for the existence allowed by its reality. That sounds difficult, but it's not, if we listen to it from our own experience. There is a state of constriction when something that knows its possibility to become, something that already is aware about the possibility of its becoming, but has not yet come into being. There is this sense of constriction, like something that I want to say and I can't, like something that sticks in my mouth or my throat and I can't express it, like the state of mind that an artist sometimes goes through for days and weeks, because there is something building up, there is something boiling, but before it comes out into expression, there is a tremendous sense of constriction, of contraction. So that's what Ibn Arabi talks about. Everything that is aware in a potential sort of way of its possible existence wants to exist, wants to be born. So the All-Merciful relieves this constriction through his breath. So the All-Merciful breathes. That's the act of creation. And everything pours out. So he relieves this constriction through his breath, since he brings the possible thing into existence, like a mother who carries a child, and the time is coming, and there is this state of anxiety or contraction or constriction before it comes. And actually the whole process of labor is one of contractions and release, contraction and release, because something wants to be born. Hence, this is still Ibn Arabi, hence his giving relief is his elimination of the property of non-existence within the possible thing. Through the all, I'm quoting, through the all-merciful breath, God relieves every distress in his creatures. This is how the creative energy is connected with mercy, with compassion, with relief. Through the all, there is this aspect of, through breathing, God relieves every distress in his creatures. The constriction which overtakes the cosmos stems from the fact that the creature's root lies in contraction. Again, like an embryo, like a child. It lies in contraction. It's actually amazing, because it just comes to my mind now that some modern theories about the trauma of birth is because somewhere we carry, somewhere our roots lie in this contraction, in this distress. Since man comes into existence upon the divine form, he finds constriction intolerable. That's wonderful, I find, from Ibn Arabi to say so. No, we are not creatures that want to be in contraction. We want expansion. So we find the constriction intolerable. And so God relieves that in him through this all-merciful breath, inasmuch as his breathing is a property of the love by which he described himself in the saying, I loved to be known. And that's the most mysterious tradition that keeps coming up in almost every Sufi book that I know. That God said, I was a hidden treasure, and I loved to be known. Therefore, I created the world. I really don't know if there is any other system. Perhaps there is, but I'm not aware of, that takes this myth or this impulse of creation as deep as that. God says, I was a hidden treasure, so everything is coiled in, everything is autistic, everything is folded into itself. And I love to be known, so we are the image of God, because God wants to know itself. So God, and this is also another aspect of this breath of the All-Merciful. God makes man manifest through the all-merciful breath. Hence, this divine breathing is identical with the existence of the cosmos. And the cosmos comes to know him as he desired. So again, a shared experience. One knows the other. One loves the other. That's what is. This is how powerful Beis Sab's words are. In the whole of the universe, there are only two. And so, the cosmos, too, is identical with mercy. Nothing else. So far, Ibn Arabi, very powerful, very distilled words, but words which come from human experience, not from speculation. But creation is not a one-off happening. It goes on all the time. This is not a system in which God created the world and then disappeared and rested. Disappeared into its hidden aspect. No, creation is something which goes on all the time. Every breath is a new creation. Every breath is a new creative force. Every breath is also the culmination, the climax, the orgasm of the erotic act of love, without which nothing can come into existence. This breath of the All-Merciful, Nafas Rahman in Arabic, is seen thus as both a sigh of relief after holding on so much, and that which breathes life. I mean, it's really so profoundly similar to a giving birth experience that every mother knows. Thus, creation is conceived of in these bold and concrete terms as both the act and the product of the divine erotic energy. God created the universe as a product of love, and therefore, in spite of all appearances, creation has been and will always be, as long as it exists, the manifested loved one of God. And this loving, creative energy is identified with divine mercy, God's Rahmah, which embraces all things. Now the word Rahmah in Arabic, mercy, derives from an Arabic root which also means womb, Rahim. The womb is a feminine aspect, and the thrust, the outpouring of the erotic energy is a male aspect. Thus God, from the point of view of its undifferentiated being, is holding both feminine and masculine within itself. It is both father and mother. And by reflection, we too hold these two opposites within our being. By loving another, we become liberated from holding these two powerful opposites alone by ourselves. In the same way as by creating us, God became released of its aloneness. And I think most of us remember the passage at the end of The Daughter of Fire, where Mrs. Tweedy tells of her memory of Guruji when she is in the Himalaya, or before she goes to the Himalaya, after he had died. And she just recollects. And she recollects this morning when an old lady came to Baysab and expressed all her difficulties, all her miseries, all her unhappiness, her loneliness, the fact that she is old and all her children died, and so on and so on. And she asked, Baysab, why did God create the world when there is so much misery in it? Or why did God create me that I have to suffer all that misery? And Mrs. Tweedy writes, he just leaned towards her and very softly said, because he was alone. He wanted you to keep him company. I mean, that's as deep as it goes. So it's true. It's not when Guruji says these things, when Mrs. Tweedy records this thing, it's not just a beautiful saying. In the same way as by creating us, God became released of its aloneness. Now, the moment in which we experience these opposites in us is a tremendously powerful moment. And I would like to share here with you an experience. In the Sufi creation myth, there is a very powerful image, the pen. I brought this lovely quill that Maria once made for me. So that's the image of the pen. It's very much part of the Sufi tradition and the Muslim tradition at large. The divine pen, which writes all created beings in the book of creation, which is also known as the mother of books, al-Kitab. So the divine pen writes us. This is another way of expressing creation. So once I saw an ink bottle on a shelf. I was sitting in a quiet little room talking to someone when my eye caught this innocent-looking ink bottle. For some reason, the sight of the ink bottle created in me a strange state of agitation. For a few minutes I could not breathe very well. I was overcome by some powerful emotions which had surfaced up from within me without any warning. In this emotional state, which I could assimilate only much later when I cooled down, I was the ink bottle, concave and full of dark, mysterious fluid, in a state of total waiting, total openness, total receptivity, total immobile silence. And then, right above the ink bottle, I saw the pen in the shape of a quill, one-pointed, sharp, purposeful, slowly coming down toward me to dip itself in my ink. I was the ink bottle, waiting in still suspension. I was the ink, and I was also the pen. And in the split second, when the pen, in my free-flowing fantasy, dipped its edge into the ink, in that split second, I experienced a shattering emotional and physical upheaval. I was at the brink of losing consciousness and the ability to hold myself together. And only after a good many days could I understand the meaning and the magnitude of this experience. Beyond its immediate Freudian interpretation, there lay for me the real experience of the clean, separated male and female identities in me, in a state of such total differentiation and polarity that the yearning for one another that it produced was almost beyond the capacity of the body to hold together. This archetypal image was also pointing to the powerful, creative symbolism of writing, of words, of letters, of sounds, of verbal expression, as the mysterious product of this inner intercourse. Thus the depth of these ancient mythical symbols became for me a living reality. I understood why the Sufi tradition is full of Eros, why all the great Sufi poets and teachers made it clear again and again that when they talk of love, they don't refer to a mild and meek sentiment of a moral or ethical or aesthetic nature, but rather to the powerful, overpowering experience of energies, or an energy which demands our total attention, our total surrender, our total being. It is from the level of this experience that the words of Ibn Arabi make sense to me. I quote another passage. The breath of the All-Merciful bestows existence upon the forms of the possible things, just as the human breath bestows existence upon letters. Hence the cosmos is the words of God in respect to this breath. And God reported in the Quran that his words will not be spent, so his creatures will never cease coming into existence, and he will never cease being a creator. Now this polarity between God and creation is reflected also in the polarity between man and woman. God loves man whom he has made in his own image, while man loves God as being the source of his own being. Because love arises only for that from which one has one's being. Love arises only for that from which one has one's being. Man, in the same vein, loves a woman or another human being because she or he is made in his image, while woman loves man because he is her source of being. Ibn Arabi describes the physical union which man has with woman as a total annihilation in her, deriving from a desire which pervades all his parts. In woman, men may contemplate God in both passive and active roles. So you see, there is no shying away from every concept of the erotic experience. And now comes an important statement also by Ibn Arabi. Contemplation of the reality without formal support is not possible. Now that's something important for us so-called spiritual people. Contemplation of reality or of the essence without formal support is not possible. Since some form or formal support is necessary, the best and most perfect kind is the contemplation of God in another human being. Now Rumi too has emphasized the tremendous polarity in which we exist by pointing out that as existing living human beings, we cannot ignore the sensual aspects of our existence. And he says, this is not a poem, this is from one of his letters, Rumi. The physical form is of great importance. Nothing can be done without the joining together of the form and the essence. However much you may sow a seed stripped of its pods, if you could find the center, the essence of a seed, and just sow it, it will not grow. Sow it with its pod, and it will become a great tree. From this point of view, says Rumi, the body is of fundamental importance and tremendously necessary for the realization of the divine intention. Now in the Sufi tradition, which is written in Persian and in Arabic, there are two words which mean love. One word is mahabba and the other is ishq. Much can be said about the difference between them, but I'll simply say that ishq literally means passionate love. It's really a word that has almost vulgar connotations, almost. So it means passionate love, love desire. And it is to this kind of love that Sufi masters point. This type of love, which includes everything which we are, soul and body. This type of love that we can know only from our real experiences of Eros. And this is why the Sufi tradition, in its Islamic framework, has put such great emphasis on the virility of the prophets and the holy men. Their virility as well as their receptivity. And in Tweedy's book too, Baysab says that sexual potency is a requisite on the spiritual path. And here's a quotation from my beloved Al-Hakim al-Tirmidhi. Very early on in the history of Sufism, he writes, the prophets, peace be with them, the prophets in the plural, not just the Prophet Muhammad, all the prophets, peace be with them, have been given a greater share of sexual potency than usual, due to the power of their prophecy. How is that? This is because when the chest becomes filled with the light of prophecy, the light overflows into the veins, and consequently the psyche, the emotions, and the veins become aroused, and they awaken desire with all its potency. The energy of desire becomes potent through the joint activity of the heart and the psyche. Again, no shying away, no beating round the bush. So, when we approach this awe-inspiring topic from the vantage point of the Sufi tradition, we become gradually aware that love here is not a wishy-washy, airy-fairy, pietistic or philosophical concept, nor is it a romantic sentiment which indulges in poetic, dreamy imagery and stays there on the level of the sentiments and imagery. Love in the Sufi teaching is a crude, ruthless and glorious reality, which is experienced on all levels of the personality, soul and body, and it demands total receptivity, total sincerity, total attention, and total responsibility. So I'll talk about this responsibility a bit later on, but I would like to read a few poems. First, a few quatrains by Rumi. They try to say what you are, spiritual or sexual. They wonder about Solomon and all his wives. In the body of the world, they say, there is a soul, and you are that. But we have ways within each other that will never be said to anyone. I love this poem because it really means that it's the same everywhere. It has been in the 13th century in Konya. It has been the same as here. Now people talk about sexuality, about spirituality. Is this that? Is that this? Bringing philosophical concept into it. The anima mundi, there is a soul to the world. You are the soul. So we're talking all sort of high and lofty things. But he says, that's not that. We have ways within each other that will never be said to anyone. Another quatrain. The human shape is a ghost made of destruction and pain. Sometimes pure light, sometimes cruel, trying wildly to open. This image tightly held within itself. Now, this is the experience of contraction, that things cannot come out. They won't or they can't. There is a strange frenzy in my head of birds flying, each particle circulating on its own. Is the one I love everywhere? Rumi is so good about describing how his real experience of love is projected into everything. You say you have no sexual longing anymore. You say you are one with the one you love. This is dangerous. Don't believe that I have love like this. If one day you see a picture of how you really think, you'll hate yourself openly. We've given up making a living. It's all this crazy love poetry now. It's everywhere. Our eyes and our feelings focus together with our words. At night, we fall into each other with such grace. When it's light, you throw me back like you do your hair. Your eyes now drunk with God, and mine with looking at you. One drunkard takes care of another. And here are some beautiful, tender lines by Jenny Cousin that I'm so glad that you allowed me to read from your book, carved out, I think, of an open heart. 2 poems of Jenny. How shall I know you when we meet? You will open your mouth to speak. Words will become birds and fly directly to heaven. But that is not the sign. Your voice will run over me like honey, enter through the pores of my skin, till each cell opens a sweet scented flower. But that is not the sign. nor is the drumbeat at the source of the waterfall, nor the flame at the source of the drumbeat. You think of your heart as a big basin overflowing, and you are in panic. You are afraid of drowning in your own body. This image has led you into confusion. Think of your heart as a doorway. Let the hordes march through you. Let's take a few minutes break and meditate. So we'll continue, but let's pause here, okay? A few minutes. Book that people know very well, I'm very fond of. This is The Conference of the Birds. It was written by Fariduddin Attar, a Persian poet of the 12th, 13th century. And he describes the journey of the birds to the king of the birds, to the Simurgh. It's one of the most enlightening books that I can think of, that I've come across. And again, for me at least, there is not only the beauty of the imagery and the beauty of the stories, but also the feeling that they were all written from a very bleeding experience, from bleeding experiences. So not just a poet sitting and writing something very nice, but really writing from the depths of his heart. And there are a few lines that I would like to read to you from Fariduddin. This is not actually from The Conference of the Bird. This is from another long poem of his, which is called Ilahi Nameh, the Book of God. And then I would like to tell something from The Conference of the Birds. So what Fariduddin Attar says is this: for all mystics to listen, if your heart desires, O helpless one, to be admitted behind the curtain, take care. Drink the blood of your liver, and yet rejoice. Be free from care while your heart is bleeding. For unless you drink your heart's blood in separation, you shall not find the way to the secret of knowledge. Because whatever we have said until now is a preparation for the concept that always somehow come together in the Sufi tradition, that love goes together with knowledge. But it has to be through the experience. It cannot be in any other way. So, very profound words. And of course, what is important is what he says: drink the blood of your liver and yet rejoice. Be free from care while your heart is bleeding. I'm not going to expound on this, but I would like to tell very briefly one of the stories in The Conference of the Birds. And perhaps I'll say first of all that in this journey of the birds, which is described in this epic, there are 7 valleys that the birds have to cross in order to reach the Simurgh, the king of the birds. And they have names, and the names relate to experiences, to stations in our mystical quest, or on our journey. And I always found it was very interesting to note that the first valley is the valley of quest. That makes sense. And the second valley is the valley of love. So that means that that without the experience of love we cannot go any further, whatever this experience of love is, whatever. But an experience which is, as I tried to describe before, demanding everything of us. Many people have this love to the teacher. So the story is about a sheikh Sam'an. And the point of the story is to tell how this sheikh, when he was an old man, and he had many followers, he had hundreds of followers, he one day or one night had a dream. And in this dream he was bowing down to an idol. And he thought nothing of it. But then the dream recurred again and again. And when it recurred for the third time, he said, "No, I have to look down into this matter. What does it mean that I bow down to the idol?" And I bow down to this idol in Rome. So I have to go to Rome, and I have to see what's there that I'm bowing down to. So as he was with all his followers, he went on a pilgrimage, so to speak, on a journey to Rome to find out the explanation, the interpretation of his dream. And as he came into the outskirts of Rome, there was a beautiful Christian woman there, sitting on a balcony. And the moment he saw her, he fell in love. And he starts a very long and arduous and very miserable description of this old sheikh, 70 years, the poem tells us, who falls in love with this young woman who actually snubs him, mocks at him, makes fun of him. And he doesn't care. He says, "I'm not moving from here." And when his disciples approach him and reproach him and say to him that he has to go back with them, he has to leave this folly, he says, "The folly was that I was never in love before. For 70 years I lived and I thought I knew everything and I taught you to follow me, but I was never in love before. This savage emotion has taken over me totally, and that's my glorious experience." And in his misery, he glorifies in this experience of love. But the young woman demands really everything that is sacred to him. She demands of him to, "If you love me, you have to throw away your Quran." And he does. She says to him, "If you love me, you have to go with me to the tavern and drink wine with me," which is unimaginable for a holy Muslim man. And he does. He goes to the tavern with her and he drinks wine with her and her friends. And then even this is not enough for her. And she says to him, "If you love me, you have to become the shepherd of my pigs to show me that you love me, because you are poor, you have nothing, there's nothing that you can offer me. At least be a shepherd to my pigs." And he accepts, in total misery, in total humiliation, in total humility. And it's in this point, when he is really at his lowest of low, that something happens. I won't go into the whole story, but something happens due to the deep prayer of a friend of his and due to the sincere prayers of his disciples who are heartbroken. But due to the sincere prayers and fasting, something happens. And he has an experience. In this experience, he sees the prophet. And the prophet tells him, "Enough, my son, enough, come out of it." And he wakes up from this miserable existence. And he decides to go back with his disciples. And at that minute, when he is already going back with his disciples, this woman, this young woman who despised him so much, who derided him, who really abused his love, she has a dream or an experience. And in this dream, in this experience of hers, she understands what he has been through and where this came from. She understands the magnitude, the profundity of his experience. And she decides to follow him. She decides to run after him to the desert. And he captures this in his intuition. And he goes back and he finds her. And she has been lost in the desert for a while. Her feet are wounded, and she's half dead from thirst and from the sun. But he embraces her. And there seems to be a kind of happy end here. But in this moment, she says, yes, but now I realize what this love, what you love to me, and what my love to you is really all about. It's not to you, and it's not to me. It's to the real beloved. And then she breathes out, and Attar says, like a drop, she evaporated into the sun. I always feel it's important. It's been very important story for me. It's been very important personally for me. I mean, lots of synchronicities have come about through this poem for me, which I'm not going to go into. But I think the main point is that through this love, which combines the human and the divine, so the real experience of a love to another human being, we can go into the divine love. Without this, we can't. That's why the teacher is important. That's why the teacher was important in Tweedy's case. That's why the teacher was important in Rumi's case. I mean, most of us know the story of Rumi, how he too, like Sheikh Sam'an, he was 50 or more than 50, an accomplished sheikh, a Sufi sheikh with many followers. But it was only when he met Shams that he knew what love means. And they didn't act it out. So I think it is important to get this like a bridging, like a linking piece of a chain. That it's not about Eros, period. That it is about Eros, but it is also about something beyond. We live in our bodies. Our spiritual journey takes place in the midst of life. We are adult women and men with wishes, desires, instincts, aspirations, both lofty and crude. And here comes the responsibility which I have mentioned before. The responsibility which has to do with the realization that it is the whole person who is the wayfarer on the path. It's no good that we think, when I go and meditate, I'm good, I feel good, and then I can go out and it doesn't matter. It's the whole person who is the wayfarer on the path. We, all of us, have huge shadows, and they too are part of us. So before we say, to paraphrase Rumi, I have no sexual desires anymore, I am one with the one I love, we have to pause. And one good way of pausing is looking at our dreams. If we are too one-sidedly spiritual, the dreams will show us that in our depths there are crude instincts, sometimes quite animalistic, which also want, to quote Mrs. Tweedy, a place in the sun. Now, someone in our group had a very powerful and deeply meaningful dream where he was invited to Tweedy's house after she had retired. And important things were conveyed to him in this dream, and the atmosphere of the dream was very numinous. But then he noticed that in one corner of the room there was a pile of underwear, Tweedy's underwear. And they were not even clean. They needed washing. So whatever this image means to the dreamer personally, it has also something significant to say to all of us, so-called spiritual people. The spiritual quest is a package deal. everything in us walks on the journey to the beloved, not only the nice, lofty things in me, also the angry man or woman in me, the adulterous, the greedy, the vengeful, the lustful, the jealous, the envious, the coward, the cheat, the murderous, and more and more and more. But here comes responsibility into play. I believe that only when we see the crude, instinctual, shadowy parts of us, only when we see them with open eyes, with no illusion for what they are, only when we accept them with utter humility, only then can we avoid what the depth psychology practitioners call acting out. And only then can we be free from becoming terribly inflated and arrogant. These are the two most dangerous aspects of that spiritual quest. The acting out, that we just do whatever we do, we are carried away, we do things without stepping back. I mean, it is so powerful, and we always have to step back. And the other is the inflation, the arrogance. And this is the true moral teaching of this path, which Jenny caught so brilliantly in her poetic image. Don't get into panic when your heart overflows. Don't get into confusion when you are at the risk of drowning. There is a way how not to drown. There is a way how not to become totally identified, even with our loftiest love for God or the teacher, let alone with our sensual desires. Think of your heart as a doorway and let the hordes march through you. The maturation of this responsibility is the real ethics of this path. In the old Sufi circles all over the Mediterranean, in the society, in the medieval society, in which women were usually kept indoors, erotic love manifested itself very often among men. Young and beardless men, probably quite effeminate, were very much part of the scene in Sufi groups. And they were there deliberately in order to awaken the emotions, in order to awaken the hearts to the image of divine beauty reflected in a human being. Now the love desire, the ishq, for these beautiful, angelic, and probably quite lustful youths has become a current theme in Sufi poetry. And the boundaries sometimes between earthly love and divine love have become almost indistinguishable on the sheer poetic level. So Hafiz, for instance, writes in one of his rubaiyat. Hafiz is a Persian poet whom the Persian people adore more than Rumi, more than any other poet. And he writes, "Like on lute, my fingers stray over your curls and play. My heart and your lips are tuned in harmony all day. Your mouth, this sweet pistachio nut, is my daily food. Lord, my wounded heart in a state of hunger all day." Now, is this a spiritual poem? Yes. But the imagery is not. So the masters, the Sufi masters, were very strict and very explicit on this point. No acting out was allowed. And Qushayri, in the 11th century, one of the great masters who compiled a textbook for Sufi novices, writes, "One of the greatest tests on this path is the company of young men. He who has been tested in this way is considered by the consensus of the masters as one who has fallen out of grace with God. Even if this man has been endowed with 1,000 wondrous experiences, the heart must not be attached to the created. Someone is quoted as saying, Kushairi writes, as I stayed in the company of 30 sheikhs who had all reached the stage of Abdal. It's a very high stage in the hierarchy of holy men. And all of them, on my taking leave of them, had admonished me and warned me from indulging in the company of young men. So this is where the real test lies, not necessarily in the company of young men, but in the acting out, in the bringing down of these tremendous emotions. The test is not in the denial of our human frailty and temptations, but in our voluntary efforts that we make not to succumb to them, not to allow them to rule our lives. The strength and merit of the human being is exactly where his weakness lies. And this is the great paradox of human existence. If we understand the essence of this paradox, we can perhaps overcome one of the main obstacles on the path and make of our hearts a doorway into the infinite.
I have a thing about acting out. I mean, I always want to act it out. And in this story about the 70-year-old sheikh, it sounds very much in a way that he actually acted out.
No, he did not. No, in the story, I mean, there was no, he was not gratified an inch, nothing. He just had to carry his frustration, and that was his experience. And that was his experience. And he had to go through this. He had to go through this because, as he said to his disciples, the waste is that it happened only now. But he had to go through this probably because he had to go through the experience of opening up and staying open without any gratification. You see, that's the paradox. That's the paradox. I mean, it's such an experience. Everyone who has been through something like an unrequited love knows about it. But it depends where it comes from and how you take it. If it makes you feel very sorry for yourself, or somehow it makes you get in touch with all your needs that you always suppressed or always denied. The other thing is, and this is much more esoteric, that it seems that when we go through such a strong experience of unfulfilled love, another body is built. We acquire another body. We acquire another more subtle body of emotions. Because with all the things that I have said and with all the quotations that I have quoted, it's not as simple as that. I mean, we start with this body that we have. That's what we have. These are our feelings. These are our emotions. These are our needs. But through the experiences, something else is born, a subtle body. And it's with this body of emotions that we can go higher. It's not as simple as that. So that's why Tweedy said so many times that when there is a personal relationship, it could be, it doesn't need to be physical, but if there is a personal relationship between the teacher and the disciple, nothing works. It doesn't work. let alone if it's physical. She once was shown a photo by someone who came to meet her, and he was with a teacher in India, and I don't remember the names, but and he showed her how intimate he was with his teacher, and they were standing sort of not embracing but just holding each other, and she talked about it in the group, and she said, in our path it cannot happen. It cannot happen. And if you read the book, you see what is going on. This is love, is it not, that she has for Guruji? This is love. But it's so remote from a physical thought, or from you see, from that's the paradox, to hold all this, and she, through this experience that he has given her in his being, or in her being with him, she went through all these revelations, all these physical revelations that she had to find out about herself. All her instinctual nature, which came as demons in these terrible nightmares or night experiences that she had, hallucinations or whatever, nearly drove her mad. And Guruji said, don't comfort yourself, and if you do, tell me. She wasn't even allowed to masturbate. So, I mean, it's quite something. But at the same time, this is not a path of celibate. It's not an ascetic path. So, on the contrary, in this tradition, people have always been encouraged to have families, to marry, to have relationships. So,
he always said if she had a sexual partner, it would be easier if she had sexuality.
it would be easier to contain it.
No, the training, it would be, I don't know, faster or easier. It would help.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, Dorothea. I mean, he says something that if she had come to him very young.
Then it's true. Then
Yes, then. But no, you have to be.
It was the sexuality. I think
You did say it would be easier if she had a partner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
think probably because sexuality is part of the
yeah, yes, yeah. The human relationship is very important in all this, not just in order to be released. This is one part of it, and that was all these quotations from Ibn Arabi. It was about this great erotic release that even God has to go through, let alone us. But because it's also about the responsibility, like we talked earlier, it's about how to be absolutely clear and to discriminate between what we project onto another human being in the attempt to make of another human being a god, which we do, and then we are very miserable. Yeah, it is practice. Yeah. So sometimes it is like, oh, if I could have someone to console me, or if I could really release it into someone, this is going to solve all my problems. It never does. And suppose this is the point. But at the same time, and I think this is what these teachers say, I mean, the powers are there. Don't deny them. Don't say, I'm spiritual, I don't have sexual desires, I'm one with the one I love. You're cheating yourself. But it doesn't have to be sexual desires. It can be any other thing that we deny. I mean, this is because the talk is about Eros and the mystical path. This is the focus, but it's everything that we deny from our shadow. All the dirty linen. That we just, yeah. Can you speak up a little bit, please, Alan?
What was interesting in that particular experience about his underwear was that I was quite aware that people aren't hurt.
Yeah.
They were hurt.
Yeah.
And although I seen it from there, it wasn't my business.
Mm.
And I just left it exactly where they were. And they definitely weren't hurt.
But what a wonderful experience for you to see the teacher too has a shadow. And I've always felt that in the group when Mrs. Sviri was around and we were with her, there were always situations where I felt, okay, we can accept that God has a shadow, but we can't accept that Tweedy has a shadow. We can accept. Why? Because we are told, and because God is so far that who knows what he has and what he doesn't have. Yes, so we say, yes, Jung told us, and we say, yes, he has a shadow, but God forbid that Mrs. Tweedy has a shadow. But she does. And so that was important. And what does a shadow mean anyway? I think that's also important, that it comes out in all these discussions. What does a shadow mean anyway? Yeah, the bits we don't like, the bits we don't know about. What? What we don't express, what we don't like, what we don't know about.
Bits that are so powerful, we're frightened of their power.
Yes.
It could be very positive.
Yes, bits we are afraid of. Tremendous powers in the human being. Again, to quote Mrs. Tweedy, she used to say, there comes a time that you have to be very careful what you think, because what you think becomes. So, that's just to show that really the teachers were talking about something very tangible, very concrete. And there's nothing moralistic or nothing self-righteous about this teaching. It's about energies. And yet it's all about ethics and behavior and responsibility and maturity.
If we've got a shadow, and part of it we don't know about, part of it we project, and part of it's very powerful, but it's very hard to deal with all the time.
Yeah. Well, that's that. I just came across the other day of this passage in the book that Guruji says to Mrs. Tweedy that according to his system, things go very slowly, very gradually. You don't get more than you can bear. They don't come all in one go. They did in Mrs. Tweedy's case because there wasn't much time, and she was somehow prepared for it. We don't know how and when we get prepared, but things have to happen in the right time.
But when you say not acting out, does that mean you accept all the society and channel it and just acknowledge it?
The non-acting out is in specific situations. It's in specific situations when you are not. What does it really mean? It means when you are not conscious of something, and you let things happen by themselves in a kind of mechanical, non-conscious, without any sort of responsibility. That's what it actually means. When you are aware of them, you know what you are doing. I remember that when Mrs. Tweedy, when the book was published in America, Daughter of Fire, she said one day, now I'm free. I've finished my work. I'm free. I can take a lover. I can do what I want. What does it mean? It comes from a person, okay, if you know what you are doing, do it. But know what you do. The acting out is when you don't know what you are doing. You're just carried away by something. And you feel very self-righteous about it because the emotions are so strong, so pure, so, positive. But you don't actually know what you're doing. So that's... Yeah. Not recognizing. Yeah. Yeah. And life will present us with situations. There's never. I don't think there is a point that we say, "Aha! Now I have accumulated all the knowledge about my shadow." I don't think so. I think it's a process, and people or situations will reflect it back to us. And that's also, in a way, the meaning behind what Mrs. Tweedy used to say, and again quoting Guruji, that you must always be like a cat, always watchful, even when you sleep, you have to be awake, because you don't know what's going to be presented to you. I tell you, this is quite the topic, this one is. Yeah, I mean, it is really goes to the heart of the matter. And it's very difficult, because I always feel that it's like sifting, how shall I say it, most of these traditions, I mean, not all the teachers wrote in such a direct way as Ibn Arabi, a distilled to almost crystal clear way as Ibn Arabi. I say crystal clear in a paradoxical way. He is considered to be very, very difficult, but it always feels that it comes from a very clear experience. But quite a lot of the teachers, they speak from a Muslim background, and the words and statements and descriptions are full with phrases and imagery that doesn't relate to us. And somehow it's like seeing what's behind it, which relates to us. Yeah. I wanted to say something about, in this connection, about modern depth psychology in these things. It sometimes seems to me that Freud, for instance, was in many respects right in his interpretations of our instincts, or how the instincts reveal themselves in our actions. But it also feels that he got the lower end of the stick. And that in fact, I mean, things that we do reflect something, but not our lowest instincts, but they reflect something that we come into the world with. So this desperate longing, let's say, in psychology can be interpreted as a longing to go back to the womb, or longing to be mothered, or longing to be fathered, or incestuous feelings for the father or for the mother, are actually another sort of an instinctual representation of something else which we come to the world with, and something that we knew before we came into the world, something, an experience in which we were immersed within something, and to that we want to go back.